Yeah.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Tampa Bay Water Board of Directors for Monday, August 19th. This meeting was noticed in the Florida Administrative Register and on the Tampa Bay Water website. The meeting is available for viewing through live streaming, and a recording of the meeting will be posted on the agency's website. At this time, I would like to ask Vice Chair Lizette Hanowitz to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let the record reflect that Councilman Miranda will not be in attendance at today's meeting. There is a budget meeting in the city of Tampa. And at this time, I'd like to ask Kathleen if we could establish a roll call, please, for a quorum.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Councilmember Hanowitz?
Here.
Mayor Davis? Here. Commissioner Eggers?
Here.
Commissioner Mariano? Councilman Miranda? Commissioner Oakley?
Here.
Commissioner Scott?
Here.
Commissioner Wustel?
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we're going to open the regular board meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we can go to public comment. We have one person signed up for public comment, and that is David Ballard Geddes Jr. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, sir. Thank you. David Ballard Geddes Jr. I live at 802 Georgia Avenue in Palm Harbor. Last month, on July 24th, a particular individual addressed our Congress. While addressing Congress, this individual stated that he is being falsely accused of poisoning the well water and starting plagues, arguing that he and his people suffer from the oldest form of hatred in the world. Here is a diagram displaying the direct injecting of reclaimed water into the aquifer. The South Hillsborough Aquifer Recharge Program and the Tampa Augmentation Program is the direct injecting of a temporarily chlorinated fecal nitrate load directly into our groundwater supply, and in all likelihood, such fecal nitrates will contaminate our vital groundwater resource, poisoning our well water supply with fecal matter for generations. Here is a photograph of Wall Springs Park in Palm Harbor. The water quality of the aquifer is in such disrepair here locally that I was capable of pulling out this toxic Lingma algae upwelling directly from the spring head itself using just a single swipe of a palm frond. In order to hide the symptoms of toxic algae growth in our watersheds, this is a photograph showing a multitude of chemicals that are being blended together and sprayed throughout the watersheds of the state, veiled under a sort of a aquatic weed control program. This concocted mixture of chemicals is poisoning our water supply. So I ask, is our water being poisoned, intended to start a plague? Is the substance of water being used constitutionally as a Second Amendment weapon of choice, as a power of the earth, as written in the Declaration of Independence, ravaging our water in a long train of abuses and substances that are poisonous to our water? The Reclaim Water Variance application states that I literally owe my health, my safety, and my religious convictions. It claims eminent domain of everything of substance that I own in Statute 15303, Section 5. I ask, is reclaimed water going to be used as a biological and chemical weapon of mass destruction against us, using our sprinkler systems as a makeshift gas chamber to commit genocide, vanquishing Christianity, taking our liberty, our property, and our life, reflective of the process of the 14th Amendment. The warlock that stood before our Congress last month is attempting to deceive us with his hypocrisy and betrayal constitutionally.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geddes. At this time, seeing no other public comment, we are going to move on to our consent agenda. I have not seen that anything has been pulled, so can we please have a motion for consent?
Move approval.
Second. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
does that include B3 or is it separate?
No, B3 is on the regular agenda.
Just want to make sure. Thanks.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, who made the second?
I second it.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please record your vote on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to our regular agenda. Item B1 is the general manager's report. Mr. Cardin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and good morning. I would like to start off talking about the tropical storm that we had. Just give you a quick update. Earlier this month, we did very well, and the storm for us was a rain event, which was very much needed, considering the level of the reservoir at the time. Warren Hogg will be up right here in a few minutes after I'm done, and he will give you some numbers, but we have put in a lot of water, and we are still putting in a lot of water from that storm event. And so I just wanted to also thank the district, the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and the city of Tampa. Prior to the storm event, they were opening the gates at the river and the Tampa Bypass Canal to alleviate the level of the river ahead of the storm. And they got on the phone, and we all communicated, and we got to take water and put it in the reservoir at least 2 days ahead of the storm event that otherwise would have gone into the bay. So I just wanted to share my appreciation for the teamwork and doing so. The next item, I just want to give you an update on the South Hillsborough Wellfield. It is one of the 7 projects that the board approved to go to the next phase to meeting our future water supply needs. It consists of a new freshwater groundwater wellfield in southern Hillsborough County, made possible due to the credits from Hillsborough County South Hillsborough Aquifer Recharge Project. You've also known it as SHARP. The county currently is pumping highly treated reclaimed water into the wells along the coast near Apollo Beach, and it forms a barrier to abate the saltwater intrusion. The saltwater barrier could allow for the development of a freshwater wellfield inland. So a feasibility study was completed in 2021, and the models showed that it could yield up to 6.1 million gallons a day using these credits at that time. However, in the spring of 2023, an agreement was approved with the county to convert the test well that we used, improving up that 6.1 million gallons. The well could yield up to 2.3 million gallons a day. We are coordinating with the county and have explored reasons why we may be able to explore the bigger well field, go ahead and expand it to the full well field. We are also discussing acquiring land from the county in exchange for water development rights that we have at the former Cone Ranch property. We discussed this a few years back, and so we have been talking to the county in recent times. These sites would be used for future wells for the full implementation of that well field. We are also exploring the long-term agreement for the aquifer recharge credits that will also enable us to use into the well field. We had talks years back, and we did not come to an agreement with the county, so we are going to be discussing that in the next several months. And finally, Our staff is continuing to discuss acquiring unused permitted quantities from landowners in that area. And these quantities could be transferred to a water use permit for that well field project, and it could increase the yield of the well field along with what the county's credits could provide. So we are working on that, and I will be keeping the board abreast of how we are doing and in the following months. Also, I wanted to report that Tampa Bay Water was awarded a Radiance Award from the Public Relations Society of America Sunshine District. We did a newspaper and education publication in the Tampa Bay Times, so we did receive that award. And I do want to show you some outreach. We just have this one slide. You show in the top left, I presented at Pinellas County's board workshop last week and gave the board an update on how are we doing and our current update at Tampa Bay Water. And I will be going to all of the member governments as I do about this time of year. So I'm starting to schedule the other 5 visits, and I will be seeing you soon. The top right is Amelia Brown. She's our demand management program manager. And she's at the Land O'Lakes Library, and she's giving an update on Tampa Bay Water and the WaterWise rebate program and water restrictions. And the bottom picture is just one picture, but it shows Warren Hogg, our Chief Science Officer, and he's with the Southwest Florida Water Management District with the residents of the Keystone Odessa area to address concerns over lake levels. And he also presented at the Baum Civic Association meeting last week about the South Hillsborough Wellfield that I just described to you a minute ago. At this point, I can pause here to take some questions or turn it over to Mr. Hogg, and he can show us how we're doing with the system.
I just wanted to ask about the Keystone meeting. There was a lot of communication, I know, with my office. I'm sure Commissioner Wostel got it as well, with people in Keystone expressing concerns about the lake levels. And I know that you met with them, I believe, with Commissioner Hagan. How did that all go?
We had a robust discussion. People are very passionate about their lakes and the lake levels. Lake levels are low, but we've seen low lake and wetland levels across the region because of a 1.5-year-long drought. We have provided a lot of information to the public. We answered a lot of questions, and we're continuing to get questions from the public, many of which are thanking us for coming out and sharing information and genuinely wanting to understand how the system works. Many of them were unaware that Tampa Bay Water operated a well field in their community before that evening. Now they know who to talk to.
Good.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This reminds me, from looking at the picture, of my first meeting I had when we were doing dredging up in Hudson. And my daughter was with me at the time, probably 8 years old. And she says, "Dad, how'd the meeting?" I told my wife how the meeting went. I thought it went pretty good. They didn't like what I told them, really, but was okay. I learned what they said. I'm going to go from there. And then Amber says, "Daddy, they hated what you said." I'll see a lot of happy faces there.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Chuck, I've got a question on our dashboard on the capital improvement program. Just in reviewing that, since 2021, 22, 23, and 24, even though 24 is not quite done yet, we've budgeted a lot for capital improvements, but we haven't spent a lot. And I'm just wondering why that is. Is that, I mean, are we just projects that are not completed yet that have got pushed into other years, or?
Yeah, they are. You can clearly see that we are behind in what I call throughput. So these are budgeted in the CIP, and we have not spent to where we're trying to. That's a combination of some things that we can't control and things we can't control. The things we control is resources. So we are trying to staff and get more project managers and engineers internally. We've had some difficulty with that, and so we're a little bit understaffed to trying to move this out. The alternative to that is to hire more outside consultants, which, you know, we're trying to say internal more so than outside consultants.
Okay. Maybe next meeting, we can just have a little update on that, just to see where we're at.
Yes, and I'm hoping as I'm looking at the orange bars start moving up and meeting with the blue bars going forward.
Right.
And
Okay.
so there is a lot of work coming up, and I will see that going forward, that can continue.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, just, Warren, thank you for getting out there and having the robust conversations. Sometimes they're not pleasant, but I just really wanted to, I guess, accentuate the importance of those. There's so many folks, whether they're in our own counties, our own neighborhoods, that don't feel they have that communication or they can have that interaction with staff. And we work our days and weeks and months, and it's just normal for us. But for them, it's like a big curtain that they don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I think as much as we communicate, it's never enough. So even though you went out and did all this, just keep that in mind. I try to do that with our own staff. It's like, you guys aren't doing what you need to be doing. Even though you're doing good, even though you're doing better, it can always be even better. But thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. And I would encourage you to do that as much as possible. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. My summary today will cover our regional demands and the current status of our water supplies and environmental conditions and permits. We've had an up and down rainfall year, which is typical. We don't get consistent rain usually every month of a year. We had normal rainfall through the winter and early spring. It did get hot and dry for a couple of months into June, but we have seen very good rainfall in July. We were about 2.7 inches higher than normal. And so far for the month of August, we've averaged 8.7 inches, which is higher than what we normally expect for the whole month. Most of that came from Hurricane Debbie, and our region received anywhere from 6 to almost 10 or 11 inches across the three-county area. The very high rainfall we received from the hurricane caused the Hillsborough and Alafaya rivers to go into flood stage, and that was very bad for the residents that live along the rivers, but it's been a tremendous benefit for regional water supply. As Mr. Carden said, we have been harvesting a lot of additional water each day since Hurricane Debbie. We're adding about 200 to 205 million gallons per day to the regional reservoir and still meeting production from our surface water treatment plant. So those high flows have sustained, and they are dropping, but we're still able to harvest that much water each day. The rains from July and Hurricane Debbie have erased the drought conditions for almost all of our state. There's 2 small areas of abnormally dry conditions over around Cape Canaveral and up around Pensacola. Our region remains in a stage 1 drought alert under our water shortage mitigation plan. And that's because we assess the condition at the end of each month. So at the end of July, we still had a 3-inch rainfall deficit for the prior 12 months. And we also had a stream flow deficit in the Hillsborough River of about 2.9 million gallons a day, also for the previous 12 months. To exit this drought alert condition, we need to eliminate the rainfall deficit. So we need to be at either 0 inches or a surplus, and the river flow needs to be at least 5 mg deficit or better. We've already met the river condition. We'll have to wait until the end of August to see if we get enough additional rain to change the status of this plan. Through the month of July for the water year, we've delivered an average of 201.42 million gallons per day, which is just slightly less than what we delivered the same period last year. And it is higher, though, than our budgeted delivery of 197.7 million gallons a day for this year. Our year-to-date delivery could have been much higher, because we had very hot, dry conditions at the end of last summer into October, early November, and also in April and May of this year. But that's been balanced by the cooler, wetter weather and the one-day-a-week restrictions that have been in place in our region for the entire water year, almost the entire year. We withdrew water from our regional reservoir during April, May, and June to sustain flows at the surface water treatment plant. This graph shows two pieces of information. The orange line is the projected storage volume, and that's done at the beginning of each year. Where do we expect to be at the beginning of each month? The blue line and the shading below shows the actual water stored in the reservoir on the first day of each month. We normally begin adding water back into our reservoir at least by mid to late June. This year we didn't add water in until the middle of July. It was a very dry June and early July season. Our lowest point was about 2.3 billion gallons. And at the beginning of August, we were at 3.68 billion. Happy to report that as of midnight last night, our reservoir is holding 7.33 billion gallons, which is about 47% full. So we're almost up to halfway. And at the rate we're adding water, that's 1 billion gallons every 5 days. So we've made tremendous progress. We anticipate being at about 9 billion gallons at the end of this month, and our goal is to harvest and store as much water as we can in the reservoir and get as close to full as possible by the end of the water year. The Consolidated Water Use Permit covers 10 well fields in our northern area, and each blue bar is the monthly production from the well fields over the past 2 years. The orange line is the 12-month running average, and that's how the Water Management District judges compliance with our permit, and the limit is 90 million gallons per day. At the end of July, we averaged 88.85, so we've remained below our permit limit, and we've done that by managing our whole system. As I mentioned, we were withdrawing water from the reservoir to sustain the surface water plant during the spring and early summer. And we've done that to make sure that we not only meet your demands, but also stay in compliance with our permit. We are projecting that we'll remain below for the rest of this water year. And we're watching our operational decisions now, because what we do today and the storage we have in the reservoir will affect next year. So we're working to manage our supplies now to meet demands and also to remain in compliance with our permit in the coming year. I'll wrap up my comments with an update on the South Hillsborough County program. The demand in this service area has been steadily increasing for several years, and it took a sharp increase in the year 2023. That was before the watering restrictions and a very hot, dry year that started our drought. Since then, we've seen a reduction in demands through the winter once we got some cooler, wetter weather, and the one-day-a-week restrictions went into place and the enforcement began in earnest. We saw demands drop on a monthly basis, and that's dropped the 12-month running average back to 56.5 million gallons a day, which is actually 0.2 million gallons a day less than it was a year ago. This graph shows the water that we deliver to South Hillsborough County. The medium blue part of the bar at the bottom is what we deliver from the region to the Lithia water treatment plant. The light blue section is what we deliver from the region to the central point of connection at the north end of Brandon. And the dark blue part is what we deliver from the south central well field. This graph is similar to the consolidated permit graph I showed earlier, but this is focused just on the south central Hillsborough regional well field. Our running average had decreased to 25.29 million gallons a day at the end of July, and our permit limit is 24.95. So we are approaching our permit limit, and we anticipate being very close to that permit limit for the remainder of this water year and into next year. So we'll continue to work closely with Hillsborough County on conservation, messaging, enforcement of restrictions that are in place for the service area and our whole region. We'll continue to update the board on the status and the progress, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Warren. That was an excellent report. Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, just a little math for me, if you don't mind. Appreciate it. Just because this reservoir thing is I've always been fixated on it. So you said by the end of August, we should be at 9 billion gallons. That's the hope that we'll be there. Where are we normally supposed to be at that point? This chart really isn't that clear. So where would you say we would say 10, 11, 12? Where would we normally be?
Our goal is to have the reservoir full before the end of the summer when the rivers stop flowing. Since we started at such a low level at 2.3 billion, we knew it would take considerable time to get close to full. By the time we get to mid-August, we would like to be more than 10 billion stored so that we've got enough time to fill the reservoir before the end of the year. We are making good strides to try to catch up with that. We should start getting some rain again later this week. And if we get enough in the headwaters of the rivers to make the rivers continue to flow, we'll be able to harvest additional water through the month of August and into September.
All of this happening when we're hopefully at the tail end of a drought, number one. Number two, where we had the desal plant down, normally running at about 15 to 20 million gallons a day, starting in May or June? When would we normally kick that off? I mean, we don't have any going right now, but what would you say?
We normally start the desal operations in the end of the calendar year, so around November, December. We would run that until usually May or June when the rivers start to flow. When the rivers flow, we've got so much water supply between surface water, river water, and groundwater, the desal plant can go off for the summer. So typically it would be off right now. If it were in service, we would be probably operating now, but it's coming back online soon.
Yeah, well, I've obviously had the wrong time of the year. If I was a bird looking to go north or south, I'd have it all messed up. If to that point though, if the desal plant was doing its work in normal time, it looks like we'd probably have another 2 billion gallons of water. If we use that instead of using the reservoir, we probably have another 2 billion gallons. It looks like, just doing the numbers from January. And I guess my point really is that coming up in October and leading into January, we're going to have the desal plant going. So we'll have less of a demand from our reservoir under normal, which we be normally having. So hopefully there'll be a little correction. Is that kind of where you're thinking too?
The reservoir is storage of high river flows. Mm-hmm. So what the desal plant will do when it comes online is to deliver that water into the regional system, which will keep us from having to go to the reservoir as much or as often during the winter and spring months. So it doesn't store water, but it will reduce the amount of water we will need to take from it.
Thank you.
That's the benefit.
Better said. And I thought I heard you say that the Hillsborough River is going to stop flowing. You stop flowing at high levels.
At very high levels, yes.
Thank you, Warren, for all your work.
It better not stop
Commissioner
flowing.
Scott and then Commissioner Oakley, I'll come to you.
Appreciate that.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Warren, for that great report. Is there a point a minimum level that we let the reservoir get to, that we say, okay, this is it, we can't draw any more water out?
That would technically be empty, which has happened only once in normal operations. We work to balance our supplies so that we never want to run down to that empty level, because that supplies the south part of our service area. The only time it's been dry was during a multi-year severe drought. It did become empty. but we work to balance our three sources, and that's the power of having those three diverse sources, that we can rotate our pumping so that we don't completely get empty and we're still meeting those daily demands.
Okay, so it has been empty before, though?
It has been, yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Oakley.
Yes, Warren, very good report. I'm always amazed when you say you're pumping 200 million gallons a day into the reservoir, because that takes a lot of pumps to be able to do that. And to me, that's amazing that we're able to, and I think we can even pump more than that if we got more water. So, but I don't think the Hillsborough River is going to stop anytime soon. And we haven't gone through all of our storm cycles that are going to
That's correct.
bring us more water, which Debbie brought us a lot of water. I have some lakes that are overflowing in Pasco, and they're still overflowing at high levels right now. The fact of it is, when desal comes back on, when it came on before we did the work we're doing to it now, what level of pumping or desal water did we get out of it at that time before the new pumping? Before what we're going to do in September? Aren't we supposed to get about 20 million a day out of the desal when it starts back up?
When it comes back online, we're expecting to get 12 million gallons per day sometime in October, hopefully earlier in the month. And the plan, I believe, is, and we'll have an update later in the board meeting, I believe they're going to be able to produce up to 20 hopefully by the end of the calendar year. Okay. And those are the levels that we'll work with into the winter and spring of next year.
Okay. So what did we do last year with the desal? What amount of water did we get out of it last year?
I don't recall the average that we got from desal. We were bringing it up late in the calendar year when we experienced the problem with the plant, and that's when we took it down. So it had not operated through the summer or fall or winter, so it's been offline for over 12 months now.
Right, okay. So we'll get actually more water than we got last year because we had to shut it down. So that's a very promising thing for us. And one of our projects we're looking at in the future is possibly doing deep well, brackish water wells that possibly could go into desal and be cleaner and cheaper to operate for that part of the water, where it costs us a lot of money now when we're coming out of the TECO plant. So
correct. That's one of the studies that we're performing, and we'll bring back to the board in subsequent couple of years. Here's all the feasibility studies, see how they pan out.
Right. Okay. That's good. And I've always been a fan of the SHARP project of pumping very highly treated reclaimed water and pumping it in the ground, and also going back to the east and pumping fresh water, a credit of fresh water for the future. So that's a great project that we could get on. I think we could get online quicker than other projects. So I look forward to that. Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers, you had another.
And probably less expensively, too.
Well,
So,
yeah.
So that would be nice.
Yeah.
200 million gallons a day is what we can pump into the reservoir. And that's kind of limited by the pumps that we have. Is there a way you could do more with pumps, or is that really the cap that you can refill the reservoir with?
That is the operational limit that we have now. Could we expand that capacity to move more in? That would be an analysis of pipe size, pumping,
Okay.
elevation difference, because the reservoir is at the higher elevation. And also, do we have those high flows often enough to make it cost effective to
Right.
put in the extra capital to build the higher pumping rates? So that's an analysis we would have to undertake to see if it's cost effective.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. So.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Warren. Our next two items are going to be presented by Ms. Fernandez. We're going to first start with item B2.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, item B2 is about the Eldridge Wild Well Field project. That is where the original contractor defaulted and the surety stepped in and has rebid the project, the remainder of the project. And this agenda item is asking you all to approve the tripartite agreement between the surety Arch Insurance, Tampa Bay Water, and the replacement contractor Cat Construction. The project has increased in value, or in cost, I should say. So the surety will be covering that difference. It's about $5 million. And I would just note that there are some claims that remain pending between the parties that haven't been resolved yet. So parts of this will come back before you in the future. But this will get the replacement contractor in place, get the project moving. And I know that's something that's very important to staff. We have our special counsel for Tampa Bay Water on Zoom. If there's any questions for him, I think there's also a representative from Arch present today, if anyone has any questions.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for approval. There we go. Please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And then item B3 is related to the parking garage settlement.
Yes, I'll spend a little bit more time on this one. This is about the garage that is next door to the property we're in right now. This is what's being brought to you is a proposed settlement agreement and a pre-suit mediation that was held in early July. It's not in litigation presently, so we haven't unfortunately been able to have a shade meeting. So I have been able to brief each of you individually. My comments today will be a little more high level, given that I can't get into settlement discussions. And also, if this was not approved, we may end up in litigation. So just some background information. The current situation as it exists is that Tampa Bay Water has a 99-year parking easement agreement that was entered into in 2003 by predecessors of both Tampa Bay Water and the current parking garage owner, Plymouth Plaza. The existing agreement provides Tampa Bay Water with 163 parking spaces in exchange for Tampa Bay Water sharing in the cost of basically utilities, maintenance, repairs, et cetera, of the parking garage. We are in no way an owner of that parking garage or a joint owner of that parking garage, but the agreement as written does make Tampa Bay proportionately responsible for costs in its operation and maintenance. The surface parking lot that's here on Tampa Bay Water's property has 50 spaces. Our building occupancy requires 111 spaces. So that's the difference of 61, which presently is covered by this, and then some by the parking easement agreement. The stairwell, the garage next door, collapsed in December of 2021, and the parking garage has not been in operation since that time. There's been repairs that are still ongoing that haven't been completed yet. Plymouth Plaza, the parking garage owner, has stated that Tampa Bay Water owes it about $750,000 for repairs and other costs related to that collapse. And Tampa Bay Water has its own claimed losses of about $225,000, and both parties dispute owing each other for any of those costs. The terms of the settlement that are being brought to you for consideration would be a one-time payment of $550,000 in resolution of all claims, and also would result in the termination of that parking easement agreement. In its place, Tampa Bay Water would agree to enter into a 20-year, what I consider more of a traditional lease agreement for 75 spaces at a rate of $75 per space initially. That's contingent on the parking garage being operational via a certificate of occupancy, and also a licensed structural engineer certifying it meets life safety standards by April 1st, 2025, or Tampa Bay Water would have no obligation to enter into a lease and the parties would just go on their separate ways. The settlement payment funds do not impact the Tampa Bay Water budget because there is a project budgeted for this fiscal year that would have resulted in expansion of the surface parking lot. If this settlement is entered into, that expansion would not be needed at this time. So those funds for the construction project exceed the amount that is required for the settlement payment. And again, there's about 78 years left on the existing parking easement agreement. So that would be terminated. The amounts that we would potentially owe for that into the future are unknown, given that we don't control the maintenance or costs associated with the parking garage. So that's why we're recommending this settlement, that it will enable Tampa Bay Water to move forward with knowing what our costs are on a year-to-year basis. So we think that's preferred to what would be costly litigation if this is not resolved pre-suit. And also, we do have Tampa Bay Water's special counsel available on Zoom as well if we have any questions. I'll turn it over for discussion.
Ms. Hanowitz.
Thank you, and thank you, Kelly, for that explanation and for meeting with us. And I also discussed this issue with our outside counsel, Carly Schrader. I would like for her to, Carly, to give us some information on how this agreement addresses any of the existing issues with the parties. What are some of the important provisions, as far as she is concerned, that make this agreement something that we should be comfortable with? So, Carly, are you there?
Yes, thank you. And just to give some kind of basic pro and cons in terms of the settlement agreement that's before you, it does provide more certainty going forward. So it limits the financial obligations to a set amount per month, whereas now it's harder to budget. We don't know from a year-to-year basis until we get the budget from Plymouth Plaza what the repairs and expenses are going to be. That's kind of their determination under the existing agreement. It also avoids litigation and having to get into the various obligations that are in dispute between the parties. It does set a limit of 20 years versus the existing agreement, which has a remaining 78 years. And if the garage is not brought up to a usable condition by April 1st, 2025, that will be an end to the obligations. The existing agreement will have terminated, and there's no obligation to enter into the lease unless Plymouth Plaza meets those conditions precedent that are part of the settlement agreement. It also provides specifically for termination of the agreement by Tampa Bay Water if the parking spaces are unavailable for a period of 180 consecutive days. Hopefully that answers your question, Commissioner, and I'll be happy to answer any more specific questions.
In terms of the termination provision, you mentioned that it provides for termination if parking is not available for 180 consecutive days. Do they have to maintain it as a parking garage for 20 years?
So the obligation is that they have to provide on an annual basis report showing that the garage meets health safety standards by a engineer, somebody that's credentialed, and also has to provide any information to Tampa Bay Water in terms of if they're notified that the conditions are unsafe. They're also required to keep it up to code standards.
So my question is, so how about if they sell the property and to someone else who wants to use it as something other than a garage?
Well, it contemplates use as parking spaces. The lease is for parking spaces. And it is assignable if the underlying property is sold to another party.
Just to add on to that too, the lease agreement does state that if the parking garage is demolished for some reason, then either party has the right to terminate that.
Okay. And then, so what is the plan? What is our plan after 20 years in terms of parking, or if that situation happens? And this is probably for administration.
Yes, we have a project that we started when this occurred shortly after, and it would provide horizontal parking on the other side of the circle out there that would cover enough of the 111 spaces. So it's been designed, and it will be put on hold if we go to the lease, but it will be there to go to whenever, including after the 20 years.
Okay, so I guess it was determined that it's better for us to proceed with this agreement and have these spaces in the parking garage versus going forward with the surface parking lot project?
Yes, that was part of the negotiations of termination of the easement that went along with it, the new lease.
Okay. Okay, I'd love to hear from other commissioners. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Wustel, and then Commissioner Eggers, and then Commissioner Mariano.
Thanks. I just, the biggest eye opener to me is that this board might consider policies of making reservations for any lease agreement for 99 years, because anybody that's suggesting they can predict all of the potential outcomes that might come in a 99-year period is pretty impractical, and it's probably something that we should look into to make sure we don't keep going forward. And I think it is a good question if we're going to dump a bunch of money into repairing the parking garage, and it sounds like they might have the ability to sell it and it be bulldozed, and then we're out the money and they have the right to terminate. Is that what I just heard?
I think Carly might step in on this too, but the provision about the termination, I think, is under natural disaster. Is that correct, Carly?
It's under natural disasters, fire, and other casualty, I think was.
Right. So I don't know that it doesn't really contemplate voluntary destruction. They're obligated under the lease to provide us with those spaces for 20 years.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, so the way I kind of looked at it was that if we had the best case scenario almost for us, I mean, forget all of the current agreements, would be to build our own parking space and be done with it. But this negotiated settlement allows us a way out of that equity position that we were in as almost like a co-owner of a property with all that goes with it into this other agreement. We'd be out of that 78 years left into a more normal agreement. So that was almost a requirement. It's not like we have a choice, really. We either choice to, or we could go to litigation, as you said. So, because I was thinking, well, gosh, it just makes sense to build our own parking and, be done with that. But at the same time, I think the other path is still untold, what we might be stuck with. So to your point, Commissioner Wastel, I agree. The 99 years seems like, I don't know what the situation was at the time, but maybe ownership and a reduced rent had some value. I don't know. But in any event, I think we have to move forward in this direction. Thank you.
Commissioner Mariano.
Thank you. I'm actually a little concerned about the settlement agreement. The initial contract between Plymouth and Decade. It says in there in section 9, it says, Decade shall keep the property garage insured against any loss by fire or other casualty in such amount as reasonably determined by the Decade. So the original people building this thing have an agreement to have insurance in place. So Plymouth should be going after them, not us, from what I'm seeing. And then I really would like to get this looked at for insurance professionals to go take a look at it. When it goes to later on, it says on section 10, it talks about that with respect to each calendar year or proportion there during the term, Plymouth shall pay Decade the amount of manner provided the prorated share of the total of maintenance costs, tax costs, liability, insurance. To me, this thing should have been covered by insurance by them already. So why we're in the mix of this is beyond me. I still don't like it, and I want to dig more into it before I even say whether I want to go to litigation or not, but I'm not comfortable with the way it's set. I'm going to go a little further. Again, it talks more about insurance in section 11, and I'm going to go then to our agreement here in a second. But basically, with our agreement going from paying the $550 was just a huge number, going to $75 a spot, going from $163 to $75, and our payments are going to go up, which makes no sense to me. Give me just a second. There's supposed to be inspections. Plymouth's supposed to pay the cost of inspections. What happened to those inspections? Did we ever see those reports? That's in our agreement. That's on section 1 of numbers, section 9 under maintenance. And then section 7 is for a result of a failure to make repairs. TB does not have access to the spaces appear 180 days. We talked about that. We do have a way to get out without having to pay, I would think, especially if the other insurance is going to cover it. So with all those questions, I'm not comfortable moving forward. I don't like the way the thing's set. I can't support what I see right now. I think I need more information. I think we should be digging for more information. Going back to, I will say to the previous two commissioners, I do agree that if we had the spaces back in 2003, we should have built our own place. Maybe that changed, something happened, but maybe that should get looked at, but that's a water under the bridge at this point. If we can do it, and we got 550 allocated to that, I would much rather see the budget where we have that 550 to go build it.
Commissioner Westall. And then,
Well, are you going to opine on what he just asked? Because I'm now very curious.
Sure, I have some comments in response. So and Carly, please jump in if I say something incorrectly. So Plymouth Plaza did file a claim with their own insurance company, and they have received funds, and those funds have been subtracted from what the amount is that they claim were owed. So there's no double dipping, but the claim for the reconstruction or rehabilitation of the parking garage with their insurance company did not cover all of the costs. And we're not party to that. That's between them and their insurer, but they have made a claim, they have received some proceeds, and that has been subtracted from the total amount that's owed.
Can I speak to that for a second?
Yes.
So if they didn't properly insure themselves to the appropriate amounts to get the appropriate money, that's not our fault. And I don't see how in our agreement, we should be liable to their full coverage of insuring themselves.
Yeah, and I
You don't
think,
need the party above us.
I think what you're getting into is when we think of the litigation, if that happens, the complexities of all these different issues that would come into play of, again, our position would of course be that we don't owe anything we weren't the ones who were contracting with the subcontractor, where the stairwell collapsed, et cetera, et cetera. But, that's where we see complicated litigation agreement that is written how the agreement was written in 2003, which is not necessarily favorable potentially. But I did also want to say that part of the settlement payment and what we're looking at as spaces, we do have to take in consideration the value of that remaining 78 years of an agreement that there is no termination provision for the existing agreement. So whether we proceeded to build our own surface lot or not, if this isn't resolved, whether it's today or in the future, then we would still be obligated to share in the cost of that parking garage. That agreement would still live on. It does not have a termination provision. Whereas the new lease, some of the language you quoted, would give us, if the similar situation happened where there was any sort of failure at the parking garage where the spaces were unavailable and that failure persisted for 180 days, then we would be able to terminate, walk away, and move forward with our own parking.
Are we able to use, Mr. Chair?
yeah.
Are we able to use the spots right now?
The parking garage is currently not open because it hasn't completed its
How
renovation
long has it been shut down?
since the collapse. I think it opened very briefly at one point, but since December of 2021. But
So it's been past 180 days on that.
that doesn't exist in the existing agreement. The parking easement agreement has no provision. That's in the lease that we're suggesting would be entered into. The existing agreement has no termination provision. We're not paying. We haven't paid anything for on a quarterly basis. They haven't asked us to. We haven't made a payment since the parking garage collapsed, but the agreement persists. There's not an exit.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the financial side of it, so 75 spaces at $75 annually per year. Is that for the for the next 20 years, it never goes up?
With us, it does have a CPI.
It does have CPI. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Westall.
I would just say I do agree that Commissioner Mariano has made good points, but it still seems like the juice is worth the squeeze to get the exit agreement in 20 years into the contract. And I would support looking more, and I do believe that it's their responsibility to maintain proper insurance, but either way, that wouldn't give us the ability to leave in 20 years, and 78 is just too much. So I will support the agreement only for that reason.
Commissioner Mariano?
So when I look at, we don't know what they insured for. Did they underinsure? Did they insure? Is like the big question to me. I think the agreement that was done between Plymouth and Decade should have had it in there. It has it in there, but I don't know if it's done what they were supposed to do. It should be falling on them, not us. If we're going to get out of this agreement, then we should just get out of it clean, and we should keep that 550 to go build the spots we need. The benefit for them is they're going to have 163 spots they can go lease out to somebody else. But I don't want to go pay for all their stuff. I don't think it's our duty.
Okay, Councilwoman Hanowitz. And
What's the expected life of a garage? I mean, it's been in existence. We're going to get another 20 years. They're putting money into it. I'm just curious, like, we got another 20-year lease with this. The garage has been open since when?
I believe the year it was built was 1986. And so that's getting close to 40 years, I would say. There will be work needed going forward. If we went another 78 years, I would assume that that would be a lot of work would need to be done and potentially rebuilt. It will be approaching 120 some years at the end of this easement. So there will be a lot of work done. So I couldn't tell you exactly the life expectancy of that facility from the industry standard. I do not know.
Well, we're in litigation regarding this structure. I would hope somebody knows the answer to this in terms of the attorneys. In these negotiations, we're going to enter another 20-year contract with them for a structure that had issues. We should know the life expectancy. I know that when I vote on things, my engineers can tell me this is the life expectancy of whatever structure. So I would figure that came into the calculation about we're getting another 20-year lease.
I think, if I can answer your question, so I think while we don't have that type of report done, the 20 years, what we're understanding is they are doing this work to bring the parking garage back into operation to fix any of the issues that are there, and that for 20 years, it will be a parking garage. It will be, that's their intention to use it as that.
I mean, I like others have expressed, I mean, look, I understand that this has been, there have been negotiations, and our attorneys have come to the determination that this is the best way forward. I agree with other commissioners here that have said, 99-year lease, I can't even believe that we entered that, and we're trying to get out of this. And so this is the way to get out of it. It's painful. I understand Commissioner Mariano's concerns, just like others. So I'm fine with just being done with it, but I want to ensure that we're going to have something for the next 20 years that we can rely upon. The agreement does that, and that we have some plan in place for parking at some point in time. I mean, that's my concern, so we're not here again on an issue with these parties.
Yeah, part of the new lease, if approved, requires them every year to hire a licensed engineer to perform a life safety inspection to give to us. They have certain timing they would have to give to us. If not, there's timing provisions that would allow us to get out of the agreement if they cannot do that on an annual basis. And then between now and the time I'm here, I would be pursuing that new contract, that new parking lot, if we have to terminate. But every year it's going to be looked at from that. It's in the lease, the new lease.
Okay, thank you.
I have three now commissioners in the queue. Let me just say something. Let me ask this question first of our council, because it does sound like the board is at the very best is struggling with this. Is this, how time sensitive is this in terms of making a decision today? The collapse happened in 2021 and there's no one in the garage. Is this something that has to be decided today? Because there's an awful lot of questions that are still bubbling up.
Well, so our agreement with the other party was to bring it back to the next meeting we have. So I can't say if we don't approve it today, if it's continued. I mean, they could say that the deal is off. I can't tell you sitting here whether they would be okay with moving this forward to another meeting.
All right, so we're going to continue this discussion for a little while. I'm going to go to Commissioner Mariano next. I want to just weigh in on the side of being finished with this. I am a little bit concerned that if this falls through, we're going to find ourselves spending an awful lot more time and energy on this than perhaps taking our eye off the ball of more important things. But let me go to Commissioner Mariano and then Commissioner Scott and Commissioner Eggers.
All right, so some considerations. I didn't mind the 99-year lease part of it. The price was low enough, it's back to the CPI. I didn't mind that. It got us out of a situation. The problem I have with it is if we had the space here to build it, we should have just built it from the get-go, right? We all agree with that. So if we're going to look at building the parking lot, I think we want to, if you're going to go down this road, and I'm not ready to go down the road yet, but I think the best thing to do is go get an estimate what it's going to take to build the parking lot. You'll know that number, and you can figure out how you're going to put that in the budget. If you're going to set that to go that way, you want to get a flexible lease, whether it be the 20 years or whatever it may be, to as soon as that parking lot's built, we can end the lease as well. I haven't heard any discussion like that. We should have that in the discussion as well, because why would we want to pay on something for 20 years when I can go build it now? Just like the same mistake, let me go build it now, be done with it. Having said that, I really think, as we take the time to look at that option, we should have our own insurance company that we pay to insure all our properties to go look at the policy, not only that we have, but go look at the policy that Plymouth and Decade had together to find out if they should be covering the stuff and should we be liable for it. That's expertise you can get for free that, as our insurance agent, they should be able to look at and help us out. Because you might even be able to get a policy to cover us for all the liability everyone's worried about, what we may get stuck with. You could probably get a policy written that'll cover you for the 99 years. You don't have to worry about those big expenses coming down the road either. So all those things should be looked at before we even touch this decision, in my opinion.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're Tampa Bay Water, we're not Tampa Bay Parking. So I don't think we should have ever been in the parking business, quite honestly, and I'm very happy to get out of the parking business. If we decided to next year build horizontal parking, would we have the ability to terminate the lease for convenience?
No, so that was certainly, we had many discussions, but 20 years, because they're giving up a remaining lifespan of 78 years on an easement agreement where we don't have a termination provision, 20 years is where we landed for a lease term.
But if they fail to provide that for 180 days, then we can?
That's correct. That is the termination provision, so there's not one for convenience.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, well, I guess this is, the price of being a, quote, silent partner. It seems like we have that position with this group on this garage, and that brings a lot of responsibilities that we may or may not should know more about. I don't really know that what that agreement says, and I am concerned about that, and hopefully that's in our rearview mirror. Did anybody, just a question, maybe it's for the attorneys, did anybody ask, obviously this 550 is to get us out of a bad agreement into a better agreement in terms of flexibility of in the future of getting out if something comes up. Did anybody discuss higher amounts to just get us out of completely? Just like here's 750, here's 800. We want to build our own parking and just get out. Did anybody approach that part of a negotiated settlement?
I guess we have to be sensitive about the settlement discussions because those were confidential. And again, this is the hard part of not being able to have a shade meeting. But I will say that there were a lot of variations of different options that were discussed. And this is the best we felt we could do for Tampa Bay Water.
Okay. Okie dokie. Thank you.
Commissioner Wastel, yeah.
I would just say that 500 plus 20 years of value would be around 750. Just in your defense, just to end it now. Okay.
Seems low. Seems low to me if I was on their side, but
Commissioner Scott.
Well, there is that option on the table. We could buy the 20 years out. We can write a check for 20 years anytime we want to and walk away, right?
I'm sure they would.
Yes, we could have that discussion.
So the answer is
less than that they would also.
Well, and there may be, but I think the answer to that question is yes. So I would move approval.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion for approval with a second. Please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, we have the vote unanimously by a vote of 7-1.
It's not unanimous.
Oh, I'm sorry. It wouldn't be unanimous. I beg your pardon.
So I wonder who voted against.
I wonder who that one is.
The motion passed by a vote of 7-1.
All right. So the motion passed by a vote of 7-1, just to be clear. All right, thank you very much. We do have some action items to get to this morning. The first will be presented by Christina Sackett, our Chief Financial Officer. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. I am actually going to turn the presentation over to Jay Glover with PFM Financial Advisors. He will start the presentation and then be followed by Mr. Tom Giblin with neighbors Giblin and Nickerson.
Perfect. Thanks, Christina. Mr. Chairman, board members, Jay Glover from PFM Financial Advisors. We are the authority's financial advisor on debt-related matters. And as you will recall, 2 prior meetings before you, we came and presented some proposed financing structures related to funding the authority's CIP. Since then, we've continued to work with staff and the financing team to refine those structures and are here today to present a proposed final structure for the 2024 bonds. This will be a combination of new money and refunding restructuring bonds that will minimize the impact on the uniform rate as well as provide capacity for future bond transactions. The starting point for developing the proposed structure is the existing debt service of the authority, which you can see here. The current maximum annual debt service, or MADS, is $76.5 million. As you can see, the debt service is higher through fiscal year 2032, which creates a pinch point, but tiers down over time, creating additional bonding capacity. The resolution before you today that will be outlined in more detail by bond counsel contemplates the issuance of 3 series of bonds that will be used to fund new money capital projects and strategically restructure a portion of the authority's existing debt to provide relief through fiscal year 2032. We are proposing a wrap debt service structure to minimize the payments in the early years. The 2024 A bonds will be used to fund up to $420 million of capital projects. The 2024 B bonds will be used to refund and restructure the callable 2015 B and 2016 B bonds. And the 2024 C bonds will refund all of the 2001 A bonds. More detail on each series will be provided in subsequent slides. The table here shows the bonds that are being contemplated for restructuring to provide debt service relief through fiscal 2032, which again are the pinch point years based on the authority's existing debt service structure. Provided on this slide is more detail related to each series of bonds. The 2024 A bonds are going to be issued on a tax-exempt basis with a 30-year financing term, and we're planning to capitalize interest for 1 year. The 2024 B bonds will also be issued on a tax-exempt basis with an estimated term of 20 years. The 2024 C bonds will be issued on a taxable basis due to tax law restrictions related to the bonds being refunded. By fully refunding the 2001 A bonds, we're able to make certain amendments to the master bond resolution to give us additional flexibility as it relates to funding the debt service reserve fund. We plan to keep the current $47 million worth of cash that is in the reserve fund in place, but fund the incremental increase associated with the issuance of these bonds, which is about $33 million, via the purchase of a debt service reserve surety policy. So what that's going to do is allow you to reduce the amount of this financing by about $33 million, which creates capacity for future bonds to be issued. The graph here shows the resulting structure of the authority's debt service following the issuance of the 2024 bonds. The green bars reflect the 2024 A bonds being used to fund the new money capital projects. The 2024 B bonds are reflected in the orange colors, and the 2024 C bonds are reflected in the yellow bars. The beige bars are the existing debt service not impacted by the restructuring. Based on current market conditions, we are estimating an all-in true interest cost of about 4.25% for the proposed financing. This structure accomplishes the overall objective of minimizing the impact on the uniform rate while still keeping flexibility for future CIP needs to be funded. We are here today to seek approval of the 2024 bond resolution. If received, we anticipate pricing the financing in mid-September with a closing in early October. I'm happy to address any questions you might have, and Tom Gliblin's also here to provide more details on the bond resolution. So I can answer any questions you have now, or we can wait till the conclusion of that presentation.
Commissioner Scott has a question, and then Commissioner Wessel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in reviewing the documents for the 2024 Series A bonds, we're going to be paying interest only for what looks to be like the first 13 or 14 years, which it's the first that I had heard of that. I reviewed the documents from last month and reviewed the video, and I didn't hear that point brought up anywhere, but to me that's a material detail, because by doing that, we're going to end up paying an additional $44 million in interest over the life of that bond. So my question here is that on the rest of these bonds that we're going to be refinancing, are we going to end up paying more money over that longer term? And if so, what is that number? Because the whole point of this exercise is to stabilize rates and not have the need to increase the rates. But if we're going to end up spending more money down the road, we're going to have to raise the rates anyway. So what does that look like as we refinance these bonds? Are we going to be paying more?
The answer is, in total debt service dollars, yes, the restructuring will result in additional debt service payments being made because we are pushing debt service out beyond those pinch point year in 2032. On a net present value basis, which is what we generally look at when talking about debt service, we're showing about $2 million of net present value debt service cost associated with the restructuring of those 3 series of bonds we've discussed.
Okay, so $2 million. I think that's an important detail that we haven't talked about. I don't like the idea of issuing new debt and kicking the can down the road for 13 or 14 years. Just doesn't make a lot of sense to me to do that. We wouldn't do it in our personal lives. We wouldn't do that in our professional lives. So I've got a problem with that, and I don't know that I have enough financial data here to really make a decision on this today. I've got some concerns about that.
Commissioner Wessel.
On that note, I'm happy to not support. If everyone's not comfortable, I'll lean for the no's. I was pretty caught off guard when I saw the all-in true costs of up to 5.5% on the interest. So our CFO did provide me with detail. We heard today that they're expecting it to be 4.25. The 5.25, and 5.5 listed on the 3 different bonds are caps, not what the actual expectations are. But over the past 25 years of this organization's existence, I would say that 4.25 falls right into the average of what's been issued over the years. I don't know if that gives you any more comfort or not. Probably in today's uncertain economic times, it's probably a good thing that we were able to achieve the average over the past 25 years. We did dip down into the 2s on some of them, but it looks like a lot of them landed average about 4%. So, but I'm not a fan of kicking the can down the road. If we do lean that way, though, I would like to hear what potential repercussions there are. Commissioner Cohen and I don't know about the other jurisdictions, but we're very familiar with not having our CIPs fully funded. So, this is an unusual position for me to be in, to have the opportunity to do that. But is it a total of $2 million increase? Is that what you're saying? Over the lifetime of the new issuance, it'd be $2 million more?
Sorry, because this is obviously in the weeds, so I'll try to explain it as best as possible. The actual restructuring, so that's the 2024 B bonds and the 2024 C bonds. Those two issuances are strictly to restructure existing debt. And we're taking principal that's maturing between now and 2032 and pushing it out additional years, up to 20 years. And on a net present value basis, it's about a $2 million additional cost to doing that in terms of the debt service. Again, the total debt service is more, but we present value that back to today's figures, and it's about $2 million.
Okay, so you said it's about $2 million net increase. Just speak to me like I'm a third grader on this. Does that take into account that the 2024B is tax exempt and the 2024C is taxable?
Yeah, that takes into account the tax exempt and the taxable rates on each of those financings.
Okay. All right, I'll yield there. Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
So, again, I like your comment about third grade level because sometimes I look at this stuff and my head spins. So
I apologize for that.
No, it's not your fault. It's probably sits right here. So because I think the impact of not doing this, so we're adding capital. I'm assuming, again, just from one meeting to the next. So I'm assuming that this includes our 2028 new water supply expansion. Yes, does it says include the expansion of our surface water plant?
So the $420 million does go towards funding part of the surface water treatment plant expansion and the Hillsborough pipeline. It doesn't, the $420 million is just what we need to help get through the next 2 years of contracts. We have about $584 million in contracts in the next 2 years. So we are anticipating in 2026, potentially going out for another $260 million. And again, that's looking at what the CIP, 10-year CIP program has in it at this time, and that's not considering any of the PFAS, potential water quality treatments for PFAS or TOC, and it's also not considering what next water supply we might need in 2033.
Yeah. So I guess, just thinking out loud, if we didn't do this refinancing of the previous bonds, but just bonded out the work that we need done, this evening out that you've tried to do here would not, somebody asked, what would the repercussions be? What would be the alternative? What would the alternative look like if we didn't refinance? And I think that goes to the issue of, of doing some of this pushing out, which I agree with you, Commissioner Scott, is a little uncomfortable, but it really speaks to trying to minimize those impacts. Again, what we're doing is we're minimizing the impacts to member governments, who in turn minimize the impact to our utility rates in our own counties that are feeling a lot of pressure because of aging infrastructures that have to be replaced, and then piling on higher than normal if we don't do this. So it'd be interesting to see what this would look like if we were just doing it, number one. Number two, that finishing the capital that you talked about, which is not included in here for 2028, doesn't include water quality improvements. It doesn't include 2033 new water. So to me, again, I think we've probably done this exercise, but we're bringing it around for a landing right today. So some of the stuff we've touched on, maybe you could refresh us on those two issues.
Yeah, let me, so this is the proposed structure that PFM and the financing team have all put together as to what it would look like with the $420 million as they're proposing with the restructuring. If I can get some help from the people in the back, I do have 2 hidden slides at the end.
Hidden, ooh, love hidden slides.
Didn't want to pull them out unless we needed to. So this would be, I'm gonna let, because Jay put it together.
Yeah, so this shows the actual issuance of the $420 million on a level debt service basis. So this would be with the annual principal and interest paid on a level basis, starting in fiscal year 2027. So to address the concern of the wrap debt service structure that we talked about, this would be level P&I over the 30-year term. And as you can see, there's a significant impact on the early year debt service structure to the tune of almost $100 million of aggregate debt service between this deal and the existing debt. So, you know, it's a balance that we're trying to play here by, you know, paying as less debt service over time, but also having a minimal impact on the uniform rate, which then gets passed on to each of y'all's local jurisdictions. So there's not a scenario whereby we are able to do this and keep the uniform rate close to where it is today. I mean, we can definitely pay principal earlier in this process. There's no doubt. That's very common. But that would mean when it's budget time starting in 2026, there's going to be significant impacts on the uniform rate that's being paid by each of your member governments. So
these aren't the secret slide. That's the same one we've already
this
seen.
is the same slide, but with a different debt service structure on the 420. And if I can go back once, oh, hold on. If I'm just comparing. So you'll see here, this is with the wrap debt service structure. You'll notice the peak amounts of annual debt service are around $82 million in the early first 4 years. You see that? Yep. 80.4 to 82.1. I'm previewing Tom's slides. You see by amortizing principal starting really in year 2, that number jumps up between $84 and $98 million. So, and again, I mean, there's an alternative between the two of those where you can pay a little bit less principal in the early years, but that's going to have to be, you know, done in conjunction with your thoughts in 2026 as to what the uniform rate can be. Yeah. And then going to the next slide, which is what we're always looking at, is the future CIP as well, because you have financings that will be coming before you really on a every other year basis for several years, which my understanding is these numbers could continue to grow and likely will continue to grow. So when we layer on the 2026, 2028, and 2030 bonds on top of what we're talking about today, with that, quote, level debt service structure, you know, this is what your payments are going to look like if we do something like that. And again, significant impacts on the uniform rate in terms of this structure. So again, there's no perfect answer whereby we can, you know, pay principal off in abundance today and keep the uniform rate fairly stable. So we're trying to determine a structure that weighs those options as best as possible.
This is a hard conversation. Commissioner Wastel.
Thank you. Hopefully I can make it a little bit more digestible for folks. And just looking at it, the 2015B and 16B, all in true interest costs. The 15B is 3.1%, the 16B is 3.5%, and the 2001A is actually 5.13%. So this is where you're creating a balance. You're averaging those three down to about 4.25. I get it. In 1996, Hillsborough County infamously subsidized the Raymond James Stadium with the sales tax that was supposed to be a consumption tax. And in there, I'm just finding out that there's like 10 words that said that we also knowingly agreed to maintain the stadium to the highest conforming NFL standards, which allegedly is now obligating the taxpayers of Hillsborough County to an unknown $400 million of improvements after this original 30 years is over. So now we're going to go subsidize this billionaire some more money for audio, video technology and media improvements for like $130 million, another $130 million for concessions. It's basically one of the most outrageous things I've ever had to present it to me in my life, especially as an elected official that's representing so many people that are struggling. And I guess my point is that on top of that, there's another unreported $50 million of subsidy of people's property taxes that had to go towards that failed contract because it never met its terms at the Tampa Sports Authority. And so now you have effectively really poor people that pay property taxes because they own property too are now subsidizing a billionaire here that just sold Manchester United for like $5 billion. And for those reasons, I think that I'm okay with us being strategic and crafty in us just making sure that people can get good, clean drinking water. I think that that's a good form of government. So I'm going to move for approval on those reasons. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a
More
motion.
discussion?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
A little more discussion, please.
Yeah, well, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah.
Commissioner Mariano? Okay. And then I'll come back to Commissioner Scott and Councilman Hanowitz. But we do now have a motion on the floor for approval.
So I'm glad you brought up the points about the interest rates, et cetera, because that's where I was going to try to get to it at some point. You know, years ago, we had gone through and did a lot of restructuring and refinancing, and we saved a lot of money on interest going forward. From what I'm seeing here, we get some bonds that are 3.1, some are 5.1 or thereabouts, and we're going to compromise 4.25. Did we ever look at keeping the ones that are 3 and just refinancing the 5s down to 4.25?
Yeah, I can assure you, we looked at every alternative known to man in terms of how to structure this debt. And not only myself as your financial advisor, but you have 5 of the largest, most sophisticated Wall Street investment banking firms on your financing team that are all sitting here in the audience here today. And we solicited ideas from each of them on what structure would allow you to minimize your cost of capital and keep flexibility to fund future CIP needs moving forward. And this is the structure that we settled on. And, you know, if you think this is in the weeds, we can start talking about how we're escrowing these bonds at our call dates and what you're earning in those escrows and things. So a lot goes into the numbers, but yeah, we looked at all the options. And quite frankly, I'm hoping we'll do better than 4.25%, to be honest with you. You all follow the markets very closely. I think there's an expectation, and the market has already started to price in a rate cut coming in September. You know, we're also trying to weigh the election and wanting to get in before the election more than likely, because who knows what's going to happen with that impact. So all that to say, we looked at all the options, not only ourselves with your staff, but also the investment banking team, and this was the final structure that we thought did the best job of, you know, minimizing the debt service cost while keeping, you know, the uniform rate as low as possible, but also, more importantly, like allowing for future financing flexibility and bonding capacity, because the CIP, unfortunately, I think will continue to grow, and you're going to need to fund that moving forward.
And there's a lot to making a move. You're taking a risk. You're modifying your risk. Do you feel better about what's going to happen in November one way or the other? Will rates drop down? And if they do, how much would this decision cost us if we made that call? And do we want to pay down debt compared to just allowing capacity? Should we be working to cut that down?
Commissioner Scott and then Councilwoman Hanowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of along that line of thinking, I was just wondering, you know, did we consider just paying down some of that higher debt? Because we have $170 million in investments, which include reserves that are overfunded and CIP projects that, you know, are delayed in completion. So would we be better off just paying off some debt? And what would that do to this scenario? Did you guys look at that?
We have looked at what we can do. We do have some money in reserves, as you said. Some of the utility reserve money does have to stay in there, and as debt increases, the amount that's going to be required in that reserve will also increase. The rate stabilization account, we do have a decent amount of money in there right now. However, even with the restructuring and the new money, it will impact the next few years. So we are anticipating using a lot of that rate stabilization over the next few years to minimize that impact. With this structuring, we're looking at anywhere from 2 to 2.5% increase in the uniform rate over the next 5 years each year. And that's with this restructuring and with using rate stabilization funds. The other reserves that we have, the capital improvement and the R&R, those are already being used in the capital improvement program. So those have already been earmarked for projects that we're looking to move forward with in the next few years.
And if I could just add one more fine point on that, because I think we heard your concern last time about the level of reserves that Tampa Bay Water has in place. And one thing that we highlight in this presentation I don't want to gloss over is we are doing part of this restructuring because we want to amend the master bond resolution to allow us to buy an insurance policy or a surety policy to cover the incremental increase in the debt service reserve fund. So you're required by your bond resolution to set aside 1 year's worth of debt service in a restricted fund. Right now you have $47 million worth of cash sitting in there that secures the bondholders. With this issuance, that incremental increase will be about $33 million. So instead of issuing bonds in that amount, $33 million, and paying interest on that over the 30-year term, we're actually going to purchase a surety policy from a AA-rated bond insurer. We got some very aggressive quotes on Friday for that from Assured Guarantee. They're charging us 1.1% to do that. So that's about $350,000 kind of one-time payment out of the cost of issuance, as opposed to issuing 33 million more bonds to set in a reserve fund for 30 years. So, and we're also, looking at ideas of potentially how we can use the 47 million that's in there now in the future, but don't want to jump to that final conclusion, right away to see how the market might react. And just one more point on reserves. One of the reasons we can borrow at a cost of capital in the low 4% range is your strong credit ratings, AA+, AA1 from Moody's and S&P, and a lot of that has to do with the reserves that you have in place and days cash on hand, because as you all know, when you budget, you're not budgeting a lot of debt service coverage, which you and your local governments probably have within your utility system. Tampa Bay Water does not have that luxury given how your budget practice works. So having reserves in place is important to keep those ratings as well, which allows us to also minimize cost.
Thank you. Councilwoman.
Thank you. Well, Jay, we really got you in the weeds, huh? Everybody has a lot of good questions, and I'm really glad that we're having this robust discussion. You actually touched upon the credit ratings, and that's what I wanted to ask about. So we have our MADs, which is at 76.5 million, and then obviously we have all these other future bonds that we're going to have to take out to cover the 260 million and everything else, the future water supply. Can you touch a little bit upon that and how that came into the calculus? Because from what I'm looking at, we're going to be up there in the future in terms of MADs. Does that number change? And what is the effect of our credit rating if we take out additional monies and we're up there?
No, good questions. And we're actually meeting with both of the rating agencies tomorrow. So we'll have discussions with Moody's, S&P about not only this financing, but the future CIP and where that's headed. And we'll present that information in terms of future debt plans. So, excuse me, no doubt your max debt service is going to grow over time as you add in additional, debt, but you'll be forced during your budget process. And essentially you set the uniform rate to achieve almost 1 times coverage. So, unlike if the city of St. Petersburg or Tampa or Hillsborough or, Pinellas or Pasco, they set their utility rates to achieve probably 2-3 times coverage because it's generating a lot of cash to fund other, projects and things, and that's just the way the system works. It's very different with Tampa Bay Water. So, and that's all part of the discussion that we have, and that's one of the reasons, since that debt service coverage is so low, that we're cognizant of things like, reserves that are in place. We're also very outwardly spoken about the fact that the revenues that come into Tampa Bay Water are operating expenses of each member government that are paid before the debt service of that member government. So again, it's hard to talk about this without getting into the weeds, but all of those things go into the discussion with the rating agencies. And we're very fortunate here that each one of your local jurisdictions also has strong AA and AAA rated utility systems that are making those payments to Tampa Bay Water. So again, lots of credit strengths here, and we try to highlight all that. but also develop a financing structure that gets the rating agencies comfortable with sort of not only today, but into the future. If that helps address the question in a kind of a long rambling way, I apologize.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Wastell and then Commissioner Mariano.
I guess I agree with some of Commissioner Scott's points, and I guess my question is we can move forward with this item, but there's many other that I saw that have some higher, above 5% still, and I'm fine with using reserves if we've got a level that we're much higher than we agree to be at. We could still move forward with a different item after some analysis to use that to pay down some of those 5+ interest rate bonds if that's what his goal is. But we can move forward with this item today, I guess is my point. That does lower some of them down to 4. So.
And if I might just for a future reference, there is a set of bonds that are callable next July of 2025. So, when you're looking at refinancing, restructuring, repaying debt, you have to keep in mind what the call dates are. So there will be an opportunity to refund some additional debt, and whether you use some, reserves to supplement bond proceeds and that refunding, all that will be sort of at your discretion when that comes before you. Likely, summer of 2025.
Commissioner Mariano?
Yeah, I'd like to say, Commissioner Scott, Commissioner Wastell, I think you bring up some great points. I think you'll find that several of us like to get into the weeds, to get to the details, to break down what's the best move. I think with what's in light in front of us right now, it's a move we probably should make. But I do like the approach to let's go try to find to cut our debts down. Let's go, because the quicker we cut the debts down, the quicker we accumulate reserves and do things. If it means delaying some projects sometimes, so be it. We got a desal plant that runs at a fraction of its capacity. If I need more stuff to get me through time, I can run that more than going the other way.
That's a great segue, I think, to closing the discussion and coming to the vote, because the fact is we're going to have a lot of flexibility moving forward in a lot of different ways as to how we're going to continue to balance these issues. I think this was a great discussion today, a lot of good detail. And the one thing that we're all keeping in mind as we work through this is to try to keep the burden on the ratepayer both predictable and manageable and down as much as possible. So with that,
Mr. Chair, if I'm sorry to interrupt. I do know Tom Giblin, your bond counsel, is here with a couple of slides just to outline the details of the bond resolution. If you so want to hear that, or you just want to jump to the vote. I'm sure he's fine either way.
Tom Giblin with Neighbors Giblin and Nickerson. Let me give you the condensed version. The bond resolution feeds off the master bond resolution that was adopted back in 1998 when you did governance. Each time you do a series of bonds, we have a resolution that lays out the particulars. In this case, it's going to lay out that the general manager can go ahead and sign the purchase contract with your underwriting team, provided certain parameters are met. I think you discussed a lot of the parameters. I can go through them again if you'd like me to, or you can go right to a vote.
I think everyone looks as though they're ready to vote, so why don't we move forward? But thank you. Again, we have a motion on the table by Commissioner Wastell, seconded by Commissioner Oakley. Please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to move on now to item C2. I cannot imagine Florida-friendly landscaping is going to be as interesting as the bond resolutions, but we'll see.
Get a little bit of a break maybe here. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Item C2 is an action item requesting approval of the Florida-friendly landscaping program funding agreements with Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas counties for fiscal year 2025. Tampa Bay Water has supported the Florida-friendly landscaping program since 1995, and these funding agreements have been approved annually for program implementation in Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas counties. Staff in each county work with homeowners, HOAs, and property managers to encourage Florida-friendly landscaping principles, which importantly includes outdoor water conservation. Improved water quality is also a benefit of the program since agents educate the public about how to maintain healthy landscapes and use less fertilizer and chemicals for weed and pest control. The 2023 annual report for all 3 counties was attached to the agenda item, and here are some highlights. The The program saved more than 38 million gallons of water throughout the year in 2023. 177 presentations were delivered, reaching nearly 3,000 citizens, and a combined total of 231 evaluations of irrigation systems and landscapes were conducted with homeowners and homeowner associations. The 3 contract amounts are shown here, and they are slightly different for each county due to the fact that Hillsborough staff prepares an additional work product and they receive the regular 3% increase. Pasco County conducted a pay class study recently, which resulted in salary requirements slightly beyond the regular 3% increase above last year's contract amount, and Pinellas County received the regular 3% increase from last year. Staff recommends the board approve the 3 Florida-friendly landscaping funding agreements for fiscal year 2025 with Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas counties.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? If not, please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Items C3 and C4 are going to be handled by Chuck Carden, and they're both contract issues. Mr. Carden.
Yes, and I'll be very brief. Item C3 is for as-needed well pump repairs and replacement services with Southeast Drilling Services. This is an as-needed contract to come out and help us with our wells. We have over 175 wells in the system. It's a 2-year contract initially with a 2-year option. So staff is recommending approval of the contract for $4 million over those 4 years for the life of the contract.
Move approval.
Second.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yes, Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is as needed. Do we have any projects that currently in the works?
Mr. Hogg, is there any, are we using, the old contract is expiring, this would be a new one, anything that's finishing up?
The old contract I know is being used for the renovation of a production well in the Brandon Urban Well Field. I do not know of anything on the immediate horizon or planned. It's kind of as it comes up. If we have a well that's having water quality problems or operational issues, this allows us to go in and investigate and repair.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no additional questions, we have a motion to approve. Please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. And item number C4.
Yes, item C4 is a capital improvement project that is for the design and construction for the replacement of 13 variable frequency drives at the desal facility. The VFDs, as they're called, allow our operators to change the motor speeds and pumps remotely, and the existing 13 VFDs have reached their useful life, and it's getting harder and harder to get parts for them. So this is a CIP project, and staff is recommending approval of the project.
Any questions or comments? If not, can we please have a motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. I think it was from Commissioner Mariano. I'm not, yeah, there we go. Seconded by Commissioner Oakley. Please record your vote. Oh, wait, that's not it.
My apologies.
I'm looking at.
Move forward. I'm
yeah.
so sorry.
Would you like to do a
difficulties.
roll call vote on this? There we go. There we go. Okay. Please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 2 presentations this morning. The first is the Pinellas County Utility Director, Jeremy Waugh. Good morning.
Morning, Jeremy Waugh, Pinellas County Utilities. Try to be brief. So just a little bit about Pinellas County Utilities. We serve the unincorporated areas of Pinellas County. We have about 117,000 water customers and 30,000 reclaim customers. We also service retail accounts to multiple cities and wholesale accounts as well. But I would like to talk to you about resilience. So we're focused on resiliency here in Pinellas County in light of the recent storm that's really brought that to present, but we've been doing that for about 2 or 3 years now. So I'd like to talk about our infrastructure resiliency. So we've modeled several storm events, sea level rise storm events, 2040 events, 2100 events, high expectations, low expectations, moderate levels, to the tune of about 13 different forecasted storm events, and mapped that across our infrastructure. And as you see, we're pretty well impacted by these large storm events, especially in light of climate change. And so what we're working on as a utility is we're coming up and developing actual risk mitigation strategies on individual asset levels. We all know about plants and large pump stations, et cetera, but down to individual hydrants and electrical boxes. So that's currently in our works. It's a big task, it's several years, but we're working diligently to understand the impact of when we get large events, how's our system going to maintain and operate during those events. Along with the infrastructure resiliency, you can see these are our 5 major plants, 2 sewer plants, 3 water plants. The green is moderate flooding, the red is, oh my gosh, we're underwater, submerged, especially our Isle of Capri and Gulf Beach pump stations, which are actually located out on the beaches. So we have focused efforts on those facilities, not just flooding, but also wind hardening projects to make sure that when the storm comes and passes, that we're still here to service our customers, because as we've experienced in our neighbors to the south and neighbors to the north of us that have been impacted in recent years, it's the after the storm, people want to go and start rebuilding their lives, and water is an essential resource as part of that. Another part of resiliency, we're also looking at our operational resiliency. So we work really hard to understand how we're going to prepare and operate and serve water before, during, and after an event, including evaluating our interties between our other, not only member governments here, but our other governments that have their own water supply sources. We are renewing those contracts and agreements. We're currently in the middle of evaluating at least 3 of them as we speak. We're also looking at ways that we can make those interties more robust and find other places of connection with our partner cities, specifically St. Pete, Clearwater, and Oldsmar. But currently, we have about 15 interties with our partner governments. And then, of course, our big focus is that we only exist to serve our customers and our residents. So we also like to focus on our customer resiliency and how can we do a better job. To one of the board points earlier, we never do enough. As much as we talk about water and what we do, the public could always hear more and could use more conversations. So we're doing as much as we can to make that impact on our customer as stable as possible. Coming up in fiscal 25, we actually absorbed all of the operational increases. We've kept our budget flat, and if trying to keep our rates flat moving forward. We'll see how that works out over the next 5 years, but we're really trying to absorb those costs. We're also overhauling our entire public outreach as a utility to our customers, to our communities, much more customer engagement with our HOAs, with our customers, with our board, with the public, with the news media, et cetera. One of the major components of that is in the last year, we've implemented a new electronic portal and payment methods. I use the word modernize our payment methods. You can use Google Pay and Apple Pay and all the things we used to buy our groceries. Now you can pay your water bill with, which historically that hasn't been the case. And that portal also allows much more, I say, flexibility or freedom for the customer to understand their own usage. So you don't have to call the water company to figure out what the bill means. There's lots of resources on this portal to show your uses, to show in the impact. We have alert system sets up, so if you have a high usage alert, you can get a text and email without having to wait 2 months for your water bill and say, oh my God, my pool is leaking. The system can alert you almost immediately. Just some high-level projects and major initiatives we have going on in Pinellas County Utilities. We are currently in the 18 months into an AMI water meter replacement. So we're replacing all water and reclaim meters in our service district with the AMI meters. To date, actually a little more than 40,000 meters installed. We have several more thousands to go, but we're in the process of doing that. We've seen lots of customer feedback about how that's going, good, some positive, some negative, but we're working through that. Another major initiative that we're going through, along with all the utilities in the country, is the lead and copper rule revisions that are coming through. October 16th is the first deadline to start publishing your results and notifying the public of lead and copper. One of the convenient things about our AMR meter project is, since we are actually in these residences' houses, we're actually digging up the water lines to install the water meters. We're actually visually human verifying the water service connection on both the customer side and the county side at the meter. So when we install the meter, we dig out 2 or 3 feet, and we're verifying visually with a human the water service line material type. And through 36,000 is the last number I heard, we've found 0 lead or copper at the meter to date, which kind of coincides with what our testing has always had, that we don't have a huge lead and copper problem in Pinellas County Service District, but now we're visually verifying that. And then, just like Tampa Bay Water, our UMCR5 sampling came back. We found no PFAS chemicals in our distribution system. Some other initiatives that we're doing, we are looking at some Internet of Things. So as we're moving towards modernizing our utility, we're actually starting to pilot some automation sensors, Internet of Things devices. This is the first step to have our utility trust the sensor data. Before you can turn on the computer to run things, you have to make sure you have a human trust the system's going to work right. So we're taking our stabs into that. We are also looking at, I didn't mention it, but when you saw the map, our system is pretty linear. So where we have to do large amounts of water flushing for our water qualities in our system is also the same areas in our system that have reclaimed pressure problems. And during the drought in the last year, that's been a problem for our customers who have watering restrictions. The reclaimed water's restricted use, and yet here we are opening the hydrant and dumping water on the ground. So optics-wise, why can't we capture that water, use it for some beneficial use other than just flushing out the potable water system? So we're taking stabs at that. And lastly, we are finalizing our water system risk-based analysis so that we'll be able to make those hard decisions on which CIP projects could we defer based on funding because of risk, of which projects should we do at the right time and the right projects. Just lastly, some of our big CIP projects in the water system. We have yearly pipe replacement projects to get the old galvanized and cast iron pipes out of our system for water quality. We are doing some pretty large valve replacements. It says 60-inch valve and ends up, I think, being two valves now at the Keller plant, which is our main treatment plant. We are installing new VFDs at our North Booster Station to help some of the pressure problems there. And this picture that you see is the Gulf Beach pump station that we are improving. The picture in the top is the existing station. You see the tank that's there, and then the electrical building is kind of the old 70s Epcot-looking building, like I would describe it. And then the bottom picture is what we're doing. So we're taking all those electrical components and raising them up 15 feet or so to get out of those flood and wave surge areas. So building hardening to hurricane winds, raising the electronics above flood levels to make this more a resilient structure and water supply during events. With that, I'm here for any questions or comments.
Commissioner Oakley. Yes. Good report. Have you taken consideration of possibly the extra reclaimed water you might have that would go probably into the bay that you've got to change in the future, possibly sending that to your neighbors like Pasco County or even Hillsborough County?
Yes, if we had extra, I would send it to you. Man, I'm trying to buy some. So yeah, we're actually, and I say it a little flippantly, but we've actually been working a little bit, and maybe I could get here to this reclaimed map. So the purple side is the reclaimed service areas, and you can see we have a huge gap between our reclaimed service area.
Mm-hmm.
And you could also see down in the lower right quadrant is the St. Pete service area. So we've been working with in the last year through this drought period when there's been a great demand for this reclaimed resource. Why aren't we regionalizing this resource to some degree? So providing some more inner ties on the reclaim system. Like we know about inner ties on the water system and how to do that, but we've not been very successful at doing that on the reclaim system. And certainly, if we could connect our gap and balance the water from St. Pete to our South Cross through Clearwater and Dunedin up to Palm Harbor, and then from there up into possibly Pasco or over to Hillsborough County, I think that would be a fantastic idea.
I think that would be great to do. We know in Pasco County, it takes 4 homes to provide reclaimed water to irrigate for 1 home. So if you build 4,000 homes, you can only irrigate with reclaim 1,000 of those 4,000 homes.
Yep.
So the fact of it is, Pasco County can use more reclaimed water in our area for irrigation. I've got people calling me every day about the possibility of, can they put another well in or some other well to able to keep their yards up during the drought and all, because there's not enough reclaimed water available for our customers. So,
and we found even during this drought period, there are times when we would have a surge, an abnormal surge, and what to do with that. If we had another partner that was in need, hey, we just send the surge to you. Would be a fantastic idea.
That'd be great. But I look forward to us all working together as a region to do this kind of thing to help each other.
Sure. Great idea.
Commissioner Mariano?
On your billing that you're now taking credit cards, et cetera, do you charge a fee on those credit cards?
So the credit card service companies do charge a fee. So the vendor that we use charges a fee. I don't have the exact percentage offhand, but it's in the range of 2.5%.
Okay, thanks.
For debit ACH payments, there is no fee. So if you could use your debit card like a credit card, no fee. But if you use Visa, there's a fee.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jeremy.
We have item D2, which Rick Menzies is going to present. Tampa Bay Desalination Plant Revenue Osmosis Trench Supports Phase 2. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Agenda item D2 provides an update of the desal plant's reverse osmosis trench repair project, Phase 2. The goal of the project is to replace the reverse osmosis racks and pressure vessels and repair the concrete trenches supporting the racks to improve the reliability and resiliency of the plant and to increase its useful life when it's expected 25 years. To do this, all the racks or trains are being removed. 5 racks are being rebuilt, with 3 racks on track to be completed by the first week of October and to produce up to 12 million gallons per day of water. 2 more racks are scheduled to be completed by the end of December for up to an additional 8 million gallons per day. The construction budget is a guaranteed maximum price of $15.6 million, and the work is being performed by U.S. Water Services Corporation. The photo shows a portion of the new racks and pressure vessels being installed. After removing the existing racks, the concrete trenches and supports were evaluated for structural integrity. These trenches provide space for piping underneath the racks and provide support for the racks. Some concrete supports were replaced, and all the concrete surfaces in the trenches were cleaned and coated to protect them from exposure to salt air. The left photo shows the concrete trenches after the old racks were removed and the trenches were cleaned, and the right photo shows a trench after repairs were made. The racks hold and support the pressure vessels and high-pressure pipes. The old galvanized racks had reached the end of their useful life, and new stainless steel racks are being fabricated and installed. This photo shows the second rack being installed with the first rack in the background. The high-pressure stainless steel pipes carry raw seawater to the pressure vessels and then carries the permeate water and the concentrate away from the pressure vessels. The pipe was reconditioned by a pickling and passivation process where the pipe is dipped into a chemical solution to remove corrosion and other contaminants on the surface, and it also forms a corrosion-resistant film on the surface. Any pipe sections or pipe flanges that had existing pitting were cut out and replaced. The 2 photos show the pipes before and after the pickling and passivation process. The pressure vessels which hold the reverse osmosis membranes have also reached the end of their useful life and are being replaced with new vessels. There are 168 vessels per rack. This photo shows the new pressure vessels being installed on a new rack. The existing reverse osmosis membranes have been preserved and are being reinstalled as they still have useful life. Each pressure vessel holds 8 membranes and each rack has 1,344 membranes. The photo shows the membranes being preserved, bagged, and stored. And new control panels and signal wiring are being installed for each rack, along with a new sampling board and tubing that enable water sampling at 2 points in each pressure vessel. The photo shows one of the new control boards and sampling boards. The work completed to date is all racks have been removed except for one. That one rack is still in place and being used as a reference for rebuilding the new racks. The concrete work is complete. 2 new stainless steel racks are installed, with the third being installed now. The high-pressure stainless steel pipes have been installed on 2 racks and being installed on the third rack. And new pressure vessels have been installed on 2 racks, and a little over half the vessels have been installed on the third rack. The photo shows the work on the third rack with the first 2 racks in the background. Work still to be done by October is to complete building the third new rack and complete installing the high-pressure pipes and the pressure vessels on the third rack. Also finish all the pipe connections on all 3 racks, install the reverse osmosis membranes in the new pressure vessels, and finish installing the new control panels and sampling boards. Then begin the startup processes of the first 3 racks to produce up to 12 million gallons of water per day. We will then be working on completing the additional 2 racks while the plant is running for up to an additional 8 million gallons per day. This concludes the presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Are we on schedule for that mid-October?
Yes, as long as all the material deliveries stay on schedule, yes, we're confident we can make the first week of October.
And what kind of materials would we be waiting on?
We still need, I think it's about 40 more pressure vessels, which are to be here next week. We're still waiting for some Victaulic couplings, which attach to the pressure vessels to the high pressure pipe. We're waiting for those to come in, and they're due, I think, the second week of September. And there's other things like that are due in.
But no indications of supply issues that you've heard?
No, we've had some material that has been delayed, but the contractor has been able to make up time for that. So if everything stays on schedule now, yes, we're confident we can make the first week of October.
Great news. Great work. Thanks for the report as well.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, we are going to move on now to other administrative matters and old business. Item E1 is a piece of new business, a resolution supporting 1 day per week lawn and landscape irrigation. As all of us are aware, our region has been under a 1 day per week lawn and landscape irrigation order for some time now through SwiftMud. The city of Tampa recently decided to go to a permanent 1 day per week watering schedule. And the purpose of this resolution would be to simply encourage other local governments in our jurisdiction to consider doing the same. We know that the 1 day per week schedule made a significant and tremendous difference in our ability to deal with the recent drought. And we know that going from 2 day to 1 day per week can result in a really significant savings of potable water. So with that, I'd certainly like to open it up to the board for any questions or comments or discussion. Anyone? Commissioner Eggers?
Well, this is one of those conversations that, it's almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. We support, certainly the idea, the concept behind it. We have some practical issues that we're dealing with. So to say, yeah, we support the idea of people trying to cut back to one. So there's just so much more education that's needed. I know that we have some other concerns as well. from an enforcement standpoint, some operational challenges, et cetera. So again, I think the spirit of it, but not certainly what Tampa did. I'm not even sure what a permanent means. It means permanent until the existing council changes it. I think we've been pushing out the encouragement of using reclaimed or your watering your lawns. But I just mixed feelings about it because I want to take a leadership role philosophically, but I think in practice we have a harder time driving it home. So
Commissioner Wastel and then Commissioner Mariano.
Thanks. If it gives anybody cover, I'm really good friends with a large sod farmer, and I've had many conversations with him. And his communication to me was that the reality is that most folks don't understand that they are far overwatering their grass than anything else. So I'm going to support the resolution or whatever.
Commissioner Mariano. And then
we've been using it for we've had it in Pasco County for years. It's not a big issue for our people, so when you figure out how much water is being used, it's going to definitely save the whole region and improve the environment much better than having all that extra water going into the aquifer anyway.
I'll come back to you in just a second. Commissioner Oakley, I had Commissioner Scott.
Yeah, just quick. I mean, this is just a resolution supporting 1 day per week. We're not saying it's permanent or we're just supporting it, so I'm fine with it. So I don't know if there was a second, but I'll second it if there's not one.
Commissioner Oakley.
Yes, I realized when we went from 2 days a week to 1 day a week, we were able to save something like 30 million gallons a day. That's a lot of water saving in our system when we moved to that 1 day a week. I wish we had more reclaimed water that we do need to move on to supply all that water for the yards or whatever plants and all people. That's the big issue is people want to keep their plants and all watered, even though they overwater their grass, but some plants and beautification of their yards, they're very sensitive to, so.
Commissioner Agers.
Yeah, just one last comment. I'm really excited about the meter replacement. You all heard about that earlier on our water, but also on our reclaim system. So in fact, we'll be able to, when I came here, we have a reclaim system with no meters, and which just blew me away. But we're moving to that, so we'll be able to monitor it. We'll be able to show folks what they're using, what they're not using, so they'll be able to directly see it. I think that's going to be a really good thing for our county. And at the end of the day, if you structure your rates appropriately, like with reclaimed in the winter times, just be careful. We're going to bump your rate up a little bit. It seems to control things. So I'll certainly support it. I just wanted to raise the practical issues that we were having. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to close it out, this is, I think, our opportunity as a board to show some leadership on the topic, recognizing that each of the local jurisdictions will have to make their own decision about what works for them. But certainly want to try to move this in the right direction. So with that, we do have a motion to approve this resolution. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Or excuse me, by recording your vote, I should say.
I know they don't have that technology over in Hillsborough.
That's CIP.
We don't have it passed.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other business to take up today? With that, not seeing any, can we please have a motion to receive and file?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I think on this we can do a voice vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned until our next meeting, which will be September 16th at 9:30 a.m.